prior to August 17th, 2024, when somebody would call like a buyer from watching one of my YouTube videos or something like that and say, hey, Tony, I want to see the house at 123 Main Street. Can you show it to me tonight at 5? I'd be like, yeah, sure. Let's go check it out. And now there's a process that was changed. You may have heard about this realtor settlement lawsuit thing that we'll get more into in a minute. But now I have to have you fill out one of these forms before, here we go, one of these forms, a buyer broker representation agreements, before we tour a home. And if you're interested in finding out why, listen to the rest of this video. Hey, as a quick intro, I'm Tony Yanzer, your Northwest Indiana and Illinois real estate agent. I'd love to help you with your buying and selling journey. Contact info is probably popping up here or there somewhere and below. Reach out. I'd love to work with you or just to help you, give you some input on your buying and selling journey. All right, so getting into this form, what I'm going to do as I'll just do a quick overview of it to give you the general spirit of it. A lot of times that's what people are just looking for, and then some people want the line by line. So I'm going to go through this. Again, I do work in Illinois and Indiana. The forms I think they're identical. I just compared them line by line and didn't notice any differences. So it'll be the same thing in Illinois and Indiana. And again, I'd have to have you sign one of these before we step foot into the first house. And again, so I'll do a quick overview, and then I'll go into why this happened, and then I'll go the line by line. So what this form states is a quick 2-page form. So we got this again. It's called the buyer broker representation agreement. It talks about in broad strokes here what type of properties and region we're looking at, length of agreement. This language here is all about what I'm going to do for you. Teaser. I'm going to do my best to give you the best service that you need. Broker fee talks about compensation to me. My broker's actually, which then pays me. This talks about the broker's fee will be collected from the seller. That will put it in the offer that the seller pays the buyer's agent commission, which would be the commission going to my brokerage EXP from the seller, and that's always how it has been. It's just now there's this form that's an added step. Any additional terms? Other buyers, such as states that I might have other buyers interested in the same property as you are. Cancellation, it says that if you don't want to have this agreement anymore, you just put it in writing, and then that will cancel it. Then the buyers will sign. If it's one buyer or two, like husband and wife, or two people just buying together, and then I sign, and then that's pretty much it. So with that, so I'm now going to go into a more line by line of this. So what it is that there was recently, you probably may have heard of this National Association of Realtors lawsuit. And one of the things that happened is that we now just have to have these forms signed by buyers before we were allowed to show houses. So it's kind of a silly thing, in my opinion. It was a good system that worked before, but government steps in and does their thing, and now we have another step and more forms to fill out. So it just makes a otherwise streamlined process have one more step to it. So, and again, we're not, as realtors, we're not allowed to show any properties to a buyer without having this form signed in advance. So, all right, so I'm just going to go into the line by line. Again, it's called the buyer broker representation agreement. All right, first part starts off with, this agreement is designed to allow a buyer to engage a qualified licensed professional for the purpose of viewing property and receiving contract negotiations and advocacy services throughout the entire real estate offer and purchase process for the types of property described below. It states I'm going to work for you to look at these type of properties. So this states here, the undersigned buyer engages the undersigned brokerage firm broker to represent buyer concerning buyer's purchase of below selected real property situated in the following locations. Any real property introduced to buyer by broker in the geographic area shall be referred to as the property. So then here we just click the box on what type of property or properties and the geographic area. So this can be very broad, like Northwest Indiana or Chicagoland. All right, length of agreement. Subject to Section 9, this agreement shall begin on the date last signed by the buyer and broker and automatically end on X date or upon the closing or termination of any then pending transaction, whatever is later. So this just states a ending date. These all forms can also be modified to be like a one-time showing agreement, or other ways we can slice that, because later on there's a box here that just talks about additional terms, so we can modify it as we need. Agency disclosure. The agency relationship between buyer and broker determines how broker will work on buyer's behalf. Broker's agency relationship with buyer is disclosed and documented in a separate disclosure form. So there's a different agency disclosure that will come about towards once contract gets put together. But again, all this basically states I'm gonna do my best to help you out the best I can. Broker's efforts, a little bit repeat here. Broker will exercise good faith efforts to locate and present suitable properties to buyer, tour and prepare detailed analysis of specific homes per buyer's request, help buyer prepare, negotiate, and secure a contract to purchase one or more properties, cooperate with any real estate licensee working with the seller to facilitate and complete buyer's purchase of the property, and perform other real estate services as needed and as requested by buyer. So this generally states that I'm going to do what you probably think I'm going to do, is help you find properties, help you tour properties, and work with the listing agent on putting a contract together. All right, for best experience, by broker on buyer's first visit to the property and conduct all negotiations for the property in good faith and exclusively through broker. Buyer understands that signing more than one buyer broker representation agreement for any overlapping period of time could expose buyer to liability for paying additional fees. Buyer is not a party to any active exclusive buyer broker representation agreements. Buyer is a party to insert blank active non-exclusive buyer broker representation agreements. So this is saying that, hey, it would be best if you just work with one agent for obvious reasons, and then if you do have an existing agreement with another agent, we would just write that there, and then I'd probably just ask you some questions about that so that nobody's toes get stepped on in the transaction. Okay, broker fee. Buyer agrees to pay broker as provided below the broker fee for any properties involving broker's efforts. No broker fee is due if broker's efforts involve only locating and presenting suitable properties for consideration. The broker fee is not set by law and is fully negotiable, as it always has been. The broker fee shall be due and payable upon successful closing. If buyer enters into an agreement to purchase for any property within X days following the expiration or earlier cancellation of this agreement, then buyer shall pay the broker fee to broker upon closing. The broker fee shall be in U.S. currency and paid at the time and as a condition of closing. This agreement shall act as escrow instructions for payment of the broker fee to broker. This section 6 shall survive the expiration or earlier cancellation of this contract. And then it talks about the broker fee, so I'll circle back to this. So in here, this just states that the broker fee, and again, it just spells out what the broker fee would be, and be due at closing. And again, as is always been standard, is the seller 99% of the time pays this broker buyer's agent commission, and that's still going to be the case here because we're going to fill out a number here for percentage as compensation, and then in our offer we just include the terms of this to state that the seller will pay to put that in writing. And again, all that stuff was just, I want to say assumed, but prior to this legal settlement, in the MLS as an agent view, I could see what the seller was offering the buyer's agent's commission. Now that information is no longer available to me, like I can call the listing agent and ask what it is, or what I usually just do is I'll just put in 3% here, and then we ask for 3%, and then if it gets negotiated down a little bit, that's totally cool, generally speaking. So again, how this legal process works now is that I can come down to if the seller's offering less. Like a lot of sellers say offer like the 2.5% as compensation. And so, but I can't go up. So if say I wrote this at 2.5, but the seller was willing to pay 3, then I would not be able to get 3, which would be very sad. And so on the broker fee here, I'm going to put in, generally speaking, 3%. And then in our offer, we just put that seller to pay buyer's agent's commission of 3%. And then if there's some negotiation on that, along with other contract terms, then we figure that out in the negotiation process. And again, this gets into collecting broker fee from the seller. So, with this legal change, there's been a lot of bad press or misinformation of press about seller or buyer costs increasing, and that's really not the case. So collecting fee from the seller. Now this gets a little wordy here, but credit to buyer at closing. So this section gets into the mechanics of how the buyer agent commission is going to be paid. So this basically states that, and again, it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other, is that this states that the seller is going to give a credit to the buyer at closing. And then at buyer's instruction, the broker will write this request into buyer's offer of the purchase property. So this is saying it's kind of be like on the settlement statement where if you've seen one of those, there's like debits and credits, like debits to seller, credits to buyer. So this would be like debit from seller, credit to buyer for the buyer's agent commission. And then from the buyer side, it would then go as an expense to the buyer's agent commission to my brokerage eXp Realty. So it's no money out of the buyer's pocket. It's just how it showed up on the settlement statement. And then here, direct seller to broker compensation. Buyer authorizes broker eXp to request that broker fee be paid in whole or in part by the seller to broker eXp at closing. Any such arrangement will be memorialized in a separate compensation agreement as between the seller and the broker. Buyer understands that broker cannot communicate with the seller without first receiving the seller's broker's permission to do so. So this is kind of, again, this gets to the same point, but this states, that there'd be like a credit from the seller to buyer, and then it comes out of the buyer to my brokerage, and this just states that compensation would go directly from the seller. The seller to eXp. So it's just a little difference of paper. All right, here, any amounts paid to the seller towards the broker fee shall reduce the amount of the broker fee to be paid by the buyer. In no event will broker retain a broker fee that exceeds what is specified in section 6. So again, this just talks about what I was talking about earlier here, that whatever number we fill in here, it can't be higher. What's shown on the closing statement as a commission to eXp Realty can't be higher than this item 6 here. So again, always go a little bit higher, and then we can come down if needed. Here are any additional terms, like if we want this to be a one-time showing agreement or whatever else. Item 8, other buyers. Buyer acknowledges that broker may represent multiple buyers interested in purchasing the same property as buyer. So that just means that I could possibly have another buyer that's also interested in the same house you are. And cancellation. Either party may cancel this agreement effective upon delivery of written notice to the other party unless buyer is under contract to purchase the property. So this just states that, hey, if you change your mind, you want to buy a house and you want to cancel this agreement, then you can just send written notice, maybe via email, something like that. Unless we already have a contract on a property, then these terms would carry through to the closing of the property. So then it's just signing, buyer 1, buyer 2, could be husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, 2 people buying together, business partners, whatever that would have you there. So that's buyer 1, buyer 2, and then broker would be, then I would fill this out too. And then I just keep this on file. I need to have it in case I get audited for it. And then in the closing process, I have to produce this also to show that I have an agreement to work for you on your behalf, which I'd love to do. So reach out. So that's a summary of this buyer broker agency commission. Hope that was helpful. If you want to copy this document or have any questions, please ring me up, send me a text, email. All the contact information is here and below. Look forward to working with you, and I'll see you around town.